Hey guys, Political Junkie 2414 here, and welcome back to my next election prediction video. So today is October 8th, 2022. Happy Saturday, everybody. And we are officially 31 freaking days, actually less than that. Well, no, we're about 30, yeah, we're 31 days away from the 2022 midterm elections. This is huge. I've been talking about these elections for so long, and I'm excited to move on to 2024 and to take a little bit of a break from politics because it's been kind of eating up a lot of my time. But I do love this channel. I love all of you guys, not in a weird way. Yeah, today we're going to be doing my updated prediction for the 2022 U.S. gubernatorial elections and where I think these races would go, or would go if they were held today. I don't think a lot's going to change from here in November. A couple races here or there. But I do want to point out a couple things before we start. First of all, Joe Biden, his approval is, slightly going up. It's been having little surges and then it's been going down a little bit. He's now down by 9.5% nationwide when you look at all the polls. When you look at likely or registered voters, he's only down 7 points, which is really good for him. That is surprisingly well surprisingly strong performance by President Biden. Democrats and Republicans are pretty much, they're pretty close on the generic ballot. Yeah, Democrats are only up, they're up by less than a point as of right now. So, yes, the generic ballot's tightening. A lot of people are going to say this is a Labor Day surge. It's like, guys, it's been a month after Labor Day. The Labor Day surge in 2014 was a lot bigger than this, and it was a lot more frequent. And a lot can change in just a month. In 2020, in the last month from of the election season in 2020, Trump made significant gains. He picked up. He was able to win, come back in Texas and Ohio, and he won Iowa, of course, by larger margins. But as you saw, then the polls predicted. But as you saw, the polls did improve for Trump in those last couple of weeks. He narrowed up Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. And the polls drastically overestimated Biden in those states, and not necessarily in Pennsylvania, but especially in Wisconsin. Michigan was all right, but that's besides the point. A lot can change in this last month, but I seriously don't think it's going to be enough to give Republicans this blowout victory. Something will have to be fundamentally wrong about the polls in some of these states. Some of the states, not so much. So, yeah, let's just get rocking and rolling with it. Yeah, so while Democrats are doing well nationwide, it is narrowing up. And I will say that in the governor's races, it looks a lot better for the GOP than in the Senate. Of course, in the Senate, you have Georgia becoming, starting to look a little bit out of reach for the GOP. I wouldn't I wouldn't rule it out just yet for Herschel Walker, but, obviously there have been some scandals that have come out about him, big surprise there. But, yeah, we'll get to that when I make my updated Senate prediction in a week. And yeah, let's just get rocking and rolling with the predictions. So we're going to start by filling out the safe states for your party. These are going to go to the Democrats or Republicans by over 15 percentage points. California and Hawaii, no surprise there. Illinois could be under 15. I really don't think it will be, though. Darren Bailey is not a very good candidate. J.B. Pritzker's not as unpopular as people say. Maryland and Massachusetts, these are big flips for the Democrats. Typically you would see the states safe blue, and they are safe blue for a reason. The Republican incumbents are retiring in these two states. Larry Hogan was term limited in Maryland, and Charlie Baker was dissuaded to run for fear of being primaried out. Republicans have nominated some pretty extreme candidates in these two northeastern states that are honestly not going to stay in their column. There's really no way. I could see Maryland being a little bit closer because there's a GOP incumbent. But Dan Cox, is not even getting the support of Larry Hogan, so he might come a little bit closer than usual. I think he'll only lose by 20 to 25 points, but that a victory is still the victory for Westmore. And yeah, that's all I got to say about those two states. New York, I'm going to move back up to safe. I don't really know what I was doing, keeping it as likely. I think a lot of the polls in New York showing the race being really close. Like, I don't understand why people are trusting Trafalgar in a state that's not even um in a state that it hasn't even polled in the past. I've looked back, trust me. And if you see Trafalgar, Hochul's only ahead by 2, I think that's complete bull. And the thing is, even if Lee Zeldin does really well, and I think he will do well for a Republican in New York, I think he was their best candidate to put up. I think he can appeal to moderate voters, and crime is going to help him in the long run. But for abortion, that's really going to hurt him. In New York, NYC will save Hochul even if she gets blown out in northern New York. You have to remember, New York City will, just. The best case scenario for Zeldin is to get it under 5%, and even that is extremely unlikely. So I think Hochul could win by a little bit less than 15 points, but I don't really know if she will. I think that she'll honestly do a little bit better than some of these polls are suggesting. She'll do a lot worse than Chuck Schumer in the Senate election, but I mean, a victory is a victory. It's going to be safe, I think. And we have one addition. That's state of Colorado. Jared Polis is doing very, very well. He and Michael Bennett have been surging in Colorado. I never really thought that this race was going to be competitive, but I've always had it as likely because I thought the margin would be under 15%. But I mean, yeah. Oh, this is new to me. Last I checked, it was at 14.3%. Now it's at 15.1% on average for Polis. Heidi Gaynell wasn't that bad of a choice for the GOP, but they were never going to defeat Jared Polis. And anyone saying that they would is just I don't know. So yeah. So even Trafalgar has Polis up by 9 points. And polls in Colorado actually have underestimated Democratic support in the past, circa 2020. Well, not circa, but uh, uh, I guess the first example you could point to is 2020 when Biden was up by 12 points. He won by almost 14. In the end, you can look at the 2010 Senate race when Michael Bennett was supposed to lose, but he ended up winning by around two. So polls in Colorado do tend to skew a little bit towards the Republicans, and the fact that they have polls up by 15 points means he'll probably win by a little bit more, but you never know. So that's it for the safe and Democratic states. Sorry that I'm drinking so much water. Got it really, I got like something in my throat. We're gonna fill out the safe Republican states, which are gonna go to either, to the Republicans by over 15 points. Not a big surprise here. Idaho, Wyoming, South Dakota could be interesting. Kirsty Noem only won there by, a very narrow margin in 2018. And an internal poll only shows her up by 3 points. Very surprising, but South Dakota is a really red state. A lot of these states, have some pretty wonky polling. Nebraska going to be a pretty solid victory for Jim Pillen there. Oklahoma is interesting. We've seen some really competitive polls out of the state, but honestly, I don't really think it's going to be that competitive. The polls in Oklahoma, wow, I didn't even realize they were this close. 6 points. Oh my God, I did not see this. Hoffmeister is now leading. I do not know if I should put this in likely Republican or not. I did not, I did not see this. Oklahoma was a state where we weren't really getting a lot of polling data until lately. Wow, Hoffmeister is at a 41% roughly there. Okay, maybe you know what? I didn't see this. You know what? I'm gonna put Oklahoma as likely. I know that's crazy to think about, but Oklahoma's elections have been pretty close in the past. The governor elections, obviously not the federal races. And Joy Hoffmeister is a really good candidate for the Democrats. Kevin Stitt is very unpopular. He's going to run behind his polls, in or not his polls, but he's going to run behind Trump by quite a bit. And Hoffmeister has a lot of appeal to Republicans. So you know what? I don't know though. Oklahoma is a state where the polls are really wonky. I don't know. Maybe I'll keep it as safe. Just out of an abundance of caution for a polling error, I'll just keep it as safe. But you never know. I might put Oklahoma as likely by the next prediction. That's crazy to think about though. A Sooner poll showed Hoffmeister leading by 4%, but even then they showed the runoff with between Mullen and Shannon being really, really close, and it wasn't. So you know what? I'll keep it as safe for right now. That could get more interesting. Arkansas, Tennessee, Alabama going to be very solid for Republicans there. Iowa and Ohio, Democrats are not going to flip these two states, especially not in Iowa. Kim Reynolds, is very popular in the state. Chuck Grassley is also going to help her, but I think, Grassley will win by less than she does. The Democrats really don't have a chance in Iowa. In Ohio, they don't either. I think Nan Whaley is an underrated candidate, but she's got to do so much to win, and DeWine is crushing her in every single poll. Let me even look at the polling average. It's insane how much she's down by. DeWine's gonna smoke her in this race. Yeah, she's down by 17. She's probably gonna lose by more than that at the end of the day. So yeah, so Ohio is going to be safe, safe red. There's going to be a lot of crossover support for Tim Ryan, though, as the polls predict. Vermont and New Hampshire going to be very solid here. I know this is crazy to see, but in there are two really popular Republican incumbents here, and we're going to see a lot of we're going to see a lot of Democrats and Independents crossing over to support Phil Scott in Vermont and Kristen in New Hampshire. I will point out New Hampshire because the polls there have been showing it's been getting a little bit closer. Oops, sorry about that. Just a couple of months ago, Sununu was up by like a god amount. He was up by 51% in April. Now he's only up by 16. I'm not saying Democrats have any real chance at winning this race because honestly they don't. But Data for Progress actually has it as Sununu plus 13, and they have recently actually been underestimating Democrats. So I don't know. Chris Sununu's approval has kind of collapsed as of late, but he's still popular. He's just a lot less popular than he used to be. So I'm gonna keep it as safe for the GOP, but it might go to him under 15 points. So now we're going to focus on the likely states. We have quite a few here, and yeah, we're gonna get right to it. These are the states that are gonna go to either party by over 5 to 15 points. We'll start with the Republicans. Alaska. I know that there's been a lot of hype about Bill Walker winning this race, and I know the polls were, like insanely accurate in the ranked choice round against Sarah Palin, and that's a really good sign for Bill Walker, considering I think he's only down by 4 points to Dunleavy in the final round. So this race could be lean, but honestly, I think Dunleavy's, the split vote. If he gets less than 50% on election day, we might see it might get a little bit interesting. And I don't think he's going to win a majority on election day, but I still think he'll win by over 5% in the final round. So yeah, so likely, I don't know. I could be wrong about Alaska. I could easily see this going to Bill Walker, but he just doesn't have the same appeal he once did. And, Mike Dunleavy is not Sarah Palin. So I think this race is going to be pretty solid. Florida, Ron DeSantis is really popular. I know that the hurricane might damage his public image. By the way, praying for everybody who's down there in Florida, still recovering from Hurricane Ian. You're in my thoughts and prayers. So yeah, Charlie Crist is a good candidate. And I think he'll be able to capitalize on this. But DeSantis also, I don't really know how much is going to hurt him, especially since he's been letting President Biden in to help him with cleaning up the hurricane. I think he's trying to appeal as more of a moderate now, which I mean has been one of his saving graces. It's been he has been distincted from Trump. There was this one poll that showed Krista by 6 points, which is complete bullshit. But um, sorry about that. But yeah, DeSantis is beating Kristen pretty much every single poll, even in this Democratic sponsored poll, he's beating him. So I think that this race, I think the Senate election is honestly gonna be closer than the governor's election. I think DeSantis will win by around 8 or 9 points at the end of the day. I think the Senate race will be like 7 or 8 points for Rubio, maybe six. I don't know. Yeah, that's where I stand on Florida. South Carolina, it's not really going to be competitive. It's just likely for the case of Joe Cunningham being a really good candidate and Henry McMaster really, having a surprisingly close election here in 2018. I know it was a really good year for Democrats, but he won by only 8 points at the end of the day, and I had this race as safe previously. And I know Cunningham went down, but I think he's a decent candidate, and I think, while he really doesn't have a chance at actually winning, he can get it under 15 points. So now we're going to go to the likely Democratic states. We have quite a few here. So the first we're going to start off with is the state of Connecticut. Ned Lamont is a lot more popular than he was in 2018. Bob Stefanowski is just not running the same campaign he did back, 4 years ago, and I know Connecticut's governor elections are kind of close, are a lot closer than the federal races, but I just don't see a path for Stefanowski right now. So that's likely. Same with Rhode Island. I get the argument for Republicans possibly having an upset here. I get it. Dan McKee's really unpopular, but if you look at history, you can see that when incumbents are defeated in primaries, the party of that incumbent usually doesn't do so well in the general. We saw it, if you go back to like 1860 in the presidential election, James Buchanan decided not to run And of course, Democrats had a split ticket. I know this is way back, but Democrats had a split ticket in 2018, or not 2018, what am I saying? 1860. And of course, they lost to Lincoln. If you go back to 1968, Republicans, won the presidency after LBJ decided to retire because he was so unpopular. So I think, honestly, Democrats would have had a harder time had McKee actually lost his primary. I'm not saying he's like this godfather of a candidate, but it's Rhode Island. It's going to be closer than usual, but I think it'll be like 9 or 10 points, I think, at the end of the day for McKee. I don't think it's going to be that close in the end. Minnesota is another likely state. I honestly thought that Minnesota might be a sleeper for the GOP. I've completely like ruled that out. Now, I mean, you never say never, but I mean, Scott Jensen's just not doing too well against Tim Walz. Walz is up by almost 10 points in the polling average. He's been crushing him, even in his own internal. Jensen's down by 3 points. I mean, it's just not looking good for him. I thought that this race I had this race as lean for a long time, but since these polls have come out, I've, been a firm believer in Minnesota is likely blue. I don't think it's going to be like an 11-point blowout like it was for Tim Walz in 2018, but it's not going to be that close in the end. I get Minnesota is a state that's becoming more competitive, but it's just not looking good for Jensen. He's not a bad candidate too, which is surprising. I never really expected this race to get so locked down for Walz, but I mean it just has, and there's no denying it. There's really not going to be that much vote splitting between the marijuana party candidate, the weed party candidates. So there's really no shot for Republicans winning Minnesota anymore. But I do think Walz will win by single digits. It'll be like 6 or 7 points, maybe 8 at the end of the day. Michigan. I'm sorry, Tudor Dixon does not have a chance in hell to win this race. I'm sorry. Michigan was going to be, I expected to be a really competitive race just a month, not just a month ago, just a couple, like just a year ago. Honestly, I thought that Gretchen Whitmer might be even more vulnerable than Tony Evers in Wisconsin. I know that's crazy to think about now, but there was a time when I actually contemplated that. Right after Glenn Youngkin won, I thought Michigan was almost an assured flip for the GOP. And James Craig would have been the guy, if anyone was to do it, it would have been James Craig to win this race. Tudor Dixon, she might be able to get it under 5 points. Like, I think Lane Deeds is not a bad characterization, but anyone saying Tudor Dixon, like, has like a realistic shot at winning, I think are just deluding themselves. But that's besides the point. Whitmer's going to win by less than she did in 2018. I don't think Dixon's a terrible candidate, but Democrats have just they've had everything working for them in Michigan this year. They look like they're going to flip Peter Meyer's seat in the House. They look like that abortion. Well, I mean, it's almost guaranteed that referendum to legalize abortion in Michigan is going to pass by a very large margin. I mean, for God's sake, an abortion referendum. A referendum to outlaw abortion lost in Kansas of all places. I mean, come on, guys. Michigan's not gonna outlaw abortion. And I'm not saying like it's going to be like a blowout for the pro-choice side of Michigan this year. And I'm not saying Dixon's going to lose by 20, 30 points. I honestly think the referendum will win by more than that. But I think that Dixon will lose by like 6 or 7, maybe 8 points at the end of the day. It will be a pretty solid victory for Whitmer in the end. So yeah, so that's all I got on Michigan. Maine, I'm moving this back up to likely. Paul LePage's campaign is just not looking good. Even Republicans are starting to admit that LePage is not favored here. Like I don't think LePage is a terrible. I don't think he's a terrible candidate. I don't think I think the only way he could have won this race though is if he kind of like toned down his rhetoric. His past comments, and it looked like he was doing that for a while, but he's just gone full on Trump. I get it. Maine was a state that Trump has was able to make a lot closer, and Janet Mills is like not really that impressive of a candidate at all. But she did win, by a majority of the vote. She did win a majority of the vote with an independent on the ballot in 2018. So I mean that's got to say something. And I mean I do want to clear up some confusion. By the way, I did say in my last video, and I've said this for a while, that ranked choice voting was going to hurt LePage. It turns out Maine does not use ranked choice voting in statewide races. It's just federal races, so wanted to clear that up. But I mean, still, the pro-choice vote is going to really hurt LePage in Maine. He'll do really well in like northern Maine, like in the areas Trump was able to really do well in. But Mills is just gonna have he's just gonna get, demolished by Mills in the suburbs. People know Paul LePage, and I mean he didn't win a majority of the vote either time. He needs a majority this time. It's a one-on-one race between him and Mills. It's not gonna happen in my opinion. Maine was another state I thought was a sleeper fill, but I think, Janet Mills was pretty much guaranteed re-election. I think she'll win by 5 or 6 points. Could be lean still. Just because Maine kind of is weird with its governor elections. It's a really weird state politically. They really like moderates. Um, and Mills is not really that impressing of a governor at all. I honestly couldn't tell you what Janet Mills has done, to be honest. But I still don't think LePage has it in him to win. I think he'll lose by, just over a just over 5%, might be 6%. The final likely state is the state of Pennsylvania. This is, I don't think this is too surprising to most people. Josh Shapiro is just crushing Mastriano in all of these polls. He's doing so much better than Fetterman now. It looked for a while, actually, that Mastriano might do better than Oz. And I'm not saying Shapiro's going to win by 10 points. I think that's a stretch. I think he'll win by like 6 to 8 points right now. I think he's got this race in the bag. And believe me, I was someone who actually cautioned. Like I said, I was one of the people who said Mastriano might actually have a chance to win in Pennsylvania. But, he's got an anti-Semite as his campaign manager. He's not even campaigning. Shapiro is destroying him on the airwaves. Nothing is working out for Mastriano. And I wanted to point out Buckeye Politics' prediction for this race being Tiltar, and this is not me trying to slander him by any means. I think the Buckeye is a great guy in real life. I wish him the best, but I mean, I just do not understand how you can decipher from all these polls that Mastriano is, anywhere even close to winning. Like, even, Great Lakes Politics, like, I'm not a big fan of him either, but at least he acknowledges that, Shapiro's gonna win. I'm just like, fine. If that's the best you guys can get to, go ahead. If you're gonna put Pennsylvania as a blue state, fine. It doesn't matter with the margin anymore. So I think Mastriano's just really screwed in Pennsylvania. So yeah, that's really all I've got to say about Pennsylvania. I think that Shapiro's going to do really well in the suburbs. Mastriano will do better than Oz in the rural areas, but I mean, it's not going to matter. Shapiro is a very good candidate. He's won before 2 times. He outperformed Biden by 3 points. He's going to, I think he has this race in the bag right now. I don't see how Mastriano comes back from this at this point. So now we're going to get into the lean states and the tilt states. We have 8 toss-up races. These are the states that I think are going to be the most competitive. Some of them not as much as others. These will go to either party by less than 5 percentage points. The lean states are from 1 to 5 points, and we're going to try to hurry this up because I spent a lot of time in the beginning, just kind of like lagging on about some of these races. So yeah. So the first lean state we have is the state of Texas for the GOP. I think Beto O'Rourke will outrun his polling data. I just don't think it's going to be enough for him to win. He had a pretty strong debate performance from what I've heard. I haven't watched it, but Abbott is at 50% of the vote. And I think O'Rourke will do better than some of these polls suggest. That was the case in 2018. I think Abbott will win by like just under 5 points. And I think that that's pretty reasonable to say. I'm contemplating putting Texas into likely R, but I mean, Democrats historically, except for 2020, have actually done better in Texas than was expected. And so, yeah, and I think, Greg Abbott also outperformed, or underperformed his polling in 2018. I know he had like a non-existent Democratic opponent, but I mean, he was also a lot less polarizing in 2018 than he is now. He was a lot less well known. Texas is a lot more Republican at, down ballot. We saw John Cornyn win by almost double digits in 2020 when Trump only won the state by around 5. So yeah, so I think Texas could honestly be likely at the end of the day, but that's really I'm a firm believer in Texas's lean R right now. It might be likely. I don't know. I'm not that firm of a believer in it being lean R, but that's where I stand right now. Beto's a good candidate, but he just doesn't have enough to actually pull it off, in my opinion. I'd be really happy if he did. I really like Beto O'Rourke, but I don't see it. Greg Abbott's probably going to win it. Georgia. I know. Okay, I get it. The arguments for Abrams are really freaking compelling, and I want to believe them. I really do. But the polls in Georgia aren't that inaccurate. Because of demographics, I get the demographics are very important in deciding elections, and I do think Abrams will probably outrun her polling data. But she's only led in what, one poll? Let's go back to 2018. Let's even see that. I'm sorry, my phone keeps going off. If you guys can hear that, 2018. She was leading, yeah, okay, she didn't lead in that many polls, but she led in what, 6 polls, and she was tied in a lot of them. I mean, this was a race that was anticipated to be really, really competitive. And I get it. Polls in Georgia, they showed Kemp up by 3 points on election day, only won by what, one? And, I get it. Abrams can win this race if she can get it into a runoff, but I honestly do not think that she's going to do that. Kemp's already at a majority of the vote. Polls in Georgia were very, very accurate in 2020. I know that they weren't, that they've, and they've been accurate in the past before. Like 2018 was the only time when there was like a notable, underestimation of Democrats in Georgia. And Abrams is not a bad candidate by any means, but she's just not doing enough to appeal to black male voters. She's doing really well with black women, but a lot of the voters that are coming out for Warnock and, that are kind of, you know, a lot of the black men that are coming out for Warnock are more hesitant to back Abrams, and I'm not going to get into why that is. You guys can search it up on your own, but yeah, I don't see a path for Abrams right now. I mean, no, I do see a path. The demographics are convincing. Georgia is a state though where there has been ticket splitting before, especially in the Atlanta suburbs. I get it. They're a lot bluer than they were just 6 years ago. But Isaacson won by almost 14 points when Trump only won the state by 5. That's a pretty convincing argument for Kemp, and the polls in Georgia are not going to be wrong by 5 points. I don't see it. I'm sorry. I want to believe it. I really like Stacey Abrams, but I don't see it. And if there is evidence, like if Abrams comes back in these last couple of weeks, I might move this race to toss up, but I don't think I will. I don't think that's going to happen. And I don't think that this is going to go to a runoff. If it does, I'll change my tune and I'll say, maybe Abrams has a pretty good chance here. I probably put this race into the tilt R or tilt D column, for a runoff. But I don't know. I just really don't know. So that's it for the lean red states. We have New Mexico. I'm moving this down to lean D. Mark Ronchetti, has outperformed polls before. Michelle Lujan Grisham's not that unpopular, but Hispanics are still going to come out for her. And Ron Chetty, I think, he's not been doing too well in the polling data. And there is a libertarian taking away a lot of the vote from him, from him and his from him, his base, and he's been having trouble, trying to unite, he's been trying to, kind of get away from his past abortion stances to kind of win over some of those more moderate voters. And Lujan Grisham's been doing pretty well in polling data. She's only lost one poll throughout the entirety of the campaign season. I don't think it's going to be all that close in the end. I think it'll be pretty close to likely, but I'm anticipating a little bit of a polling miss in New Mexico and a little bit of an underestimation. But yeah, I mean, you can see surveys say Lujan Grisham plus 12, Lujan Grisham plus 5, LG plus 7. You just see the only poll that had Ron Chetty up was his internal, which I mean, yeah, he shouldn't be up in his own internal in New Mexico, but I mean, it's still not enough to give him the lead here. So that's where I stand on New Mexico. I think it'll be pretty closer to likely than it is to toss up at the end of the day. But Ron Chetty he still has a chance. He has a chance. I'm not going to rule it out. I think New Mexico is an underrated flip for the Republicans. But I don't see it right now. So now we have the five. Oh my God, Jesus Christ, people. Sorry. I got people texting me. They're like sending 500 texts, and I've silenced my phone, but I got my iPad in here. So these are the five true toss-up states. We're gonna go through them fairly quickly. But I'm gonna give time to each of them. I just don't want this video to go on for too long. So these are the five tilt states. These are gonna go to either party by less than 1 percentage point. These are these governor races are just like true toss-ups. These are really really close. Some of them I'm a lot more confident in one party than the other, though. I think the state I'm the most confident in one party is Arizona. Katie Hobbs has just not been doing too well in polling data. Let's look at the average. Yeah, she's only up by 0.5. I get it. Arizona's polls have historically underestimated Democrats, and I get it. Lake is not a very good candidate for Maricopa, but she, has been outperforming Blake Masters by a lot. A major by a lot in some of these polls. And Masters is down by like 5, 6 points. Lake and Hobbs are tied. I think that the problem for Katie Hobbs in this race, the problem for Democrats, she hasn't even agreed to a debate because she doesn't want to go through Carrie Lake's nonsense. And I get it. Carrie Lake's psycho, in my opinion, but she does have, if you don't debate the crazies will win. And I could still see Hobbs coming back from this. This is a similar situation this to what we had in 2018 with Cinema and McSally in the Senate race. And some of these pollsters have been showing Hobbs leading recently, which is a little convincing, but I don't know. I think Lake has good appeal to women. The problem for Masters in the Senate race is his appeal to the suburban women, which is it's been awful, frankly. And Mark Kelly's gonna win that race. I get the debate performance, but wasn't that great. But I mean, neither was it for Tom Tillis or Joni Ernst in 2020. So you can't really make that argument. So yeah, so Arizona, I think Lake's gonna have a surprise. I think she'll win. I've underestimated her before. I had this race as lean D when I started, then I've moved it to tilt D, and I've pretty much had it going back and forth for a little while. But I've had it mainly going to Hobbs recently. But I just don't see it right now. I don't see how she gets good enough turnout. I think that Lake will do very well in the rural areas, better than Masters. I think she'll do slightly better in Maricopa, but I think she'll still lose Maricopa, and if she gets good enough rural turnout and brings down some of Hobbs' margins elsewhere, she can definitely win. So that's it for Arizona. The next tilt state for the Republicans is the state of Wisconsin. I just don't see a path for Tony Evers right now. He's going to get dragged down with by Mandela Barnes with white working class voters, and in suburbs by Barnes. Ron Johnson has been doing very well in the Senate race. Evers is clearly doing better than Barnes in this governor race. And if there would, I'm not saying it's impossible for Evers to pull it out, but he only won by 1 point in 2018. He's not gonna have, he's gonna get dragged down by Tim Michaels. Wisconsin's a state that's become, it's more of a Trumpy Republican state. You know, it's a state where Democrats usually underperform their polls by quite a bit. I get the midterms are a lot better than Senate. Midterm election polling in Wisconsin's a lot better than presidential polling, and that's why I don't think it's going to be that big of a polling miss. But just looking at what Evers would have to do with white working class voters and how he would have to get Milwaukee turnout up, I mean, even, when it looks like he's going to underperform Barnes, I don't see it. I don't see it. I think he'll do better with the working class than Barnes because he's a little bit more moderate. The Republican legislature in Wisconsin really screwed him over by just blocking every single thing he proposed. And Wisconsin, I don't see it. I don't see how Evers pulls it off right now. He could. He could. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's tilt for a reason. It's very close. Tim Michaels is not the best candidate, but he's not bad enough, I think, to lose this race in an environment and in a state that's been trending so far to the right. The environment's pretty neutral right now, but for Wisconsin's, as a state, it's been pretty red in recent years. Next tilt state we have is the state of Kansas. Laura Kelly has a very good chance at winning. Derek Schmidt, is not as good of a nominee as I thought originally, but he's still a lot better than Chris Kobach. If you go to 538, I'm pretty, okay with 538, but the governor's elections, they do have some hot takes that I disagree with. One of them is Kansas. I think that they're overcompensating for their polling miss, for their miss in 2018 when they had this race as a dead heat between Kelly and Kobach. So they're kind of like giving Kelly a little bit more wiggle room here, but Emerson did overestimate Kobach in 2018. They have Kelly up by 2. We need to see a lot more polls from Kansas. I could honestly see moving it back up to lean red. I think the abortion referendum was really convincing, and Kelly is a very popular incumbent. She's going to do well with Republicans for a Democrat in Kansas, but I just don't see how she overcomes the state's partisan nature. Schmidt is not a bad enough candidate like Kobach to lose a race in a Trump plus 15 state like Kansas. Now we have the last two states, Oregon and Nevada. Oh my God, I'm sorry. The freaking ringing keeps happening. I'll check on it in a minute. But we have the two closest states here, Oregon and Nevada. And I'm gonna, this is different. This is a first for both of these states. I am giving both of these states to the GOP. I get it. This might be a little surprising to some people, might not be. We're gonna start off with Oregon because I think this race is gonna be slightly better for the GOP than in Nevada. Oregon has just, I get it. I made a video on Oregon. Kotek is not doing very well, and I understand that polls in Oregon in the past have overestimated Republican support in these governor elections, but Democrats have really not performed too well on this governor level in Oregon in recent years. Tina Kotek is really being tied too harshly to Kate Brown, and even in one-on-one matchups, like I don't believe this this Drazen plus some six poll or poll, but I don't think that Drazen would win a head-to-head matchup with Kotek by 6 points. I think that's ridiculous. I think though it's not a good sign, and when you see how much of the vote Betsy Johnson is taking away from both candidates, it's just not a good look for Democrats right now in Oregon. This is the first in my prediction history I've had it as lean D for the entirety. I'm moving it to tilt Republican. I was planning to put it as tilt Democratic, but as we've seen more and more polls, I'm convinced that Oregon's going to be the upset race of the year. I think this will be the sleeper flip that of 2022. There's usually a sleeper flip, in every election cycle. I think that this year it's going to be Oregon, and I think it's going to surprise a lot of people. And the final state, the state of Nevada, is a true toss-up. I really do not know who's going to win this race, but I'm going to put my money on Joe Lombardo right now. I get it. Nevada is a state where Democrats usually underperform or usually overperform polls, But Joe Lombardo is someone who's won in Clark County in the past, and look, he's not going to win Clark County. Like people saying he can conceivably win the county where Las Vegas is, and that's been the bastion of Democratic support in Nevada in the past. That's just crazy, but he can make it closer. And the economy is more important to Nevadans, according to polls, than abortion. I get it. Polls are not everything. Polls are not the most reliable source. You have to look at fundamentals. You have to look at past voting patterns. But Nevada isn't that blue of a state in reality. I get it. Catherine Cortez Masto is going to help Sisolak, but I honestly think that Adam Laxalt is doing very well against her. We've seen that Republicans pretty much surge in Nevada in the last couple of days. You can see CNN, even with registered voters, Sisolak and Lombardo are in a tie, and registered voters usually skew more towards Democrats. Likely voters, Lombardo's up by two. Trafalgar, which did predict Trump would win Nevada in 2020. So yeah, take Trafalgar with a grain of salt. They've not been too great in Nevada. They have Lombardo up by three. Data for Progress has an even. Emerson has an even. It's just not looking good. Fabrizio has it plus two. Fabrizio, with likely voters, they added Sisolak plus three. He was doing really well in the summer. This one internal poll for Lombardo, which showed him down to Sisolak by two. Not the best idea. Not the best. Showing, but I would take into account more of these polls. And CNN, I trust the CNN poll. I get it. The grades for these pollsters matter, and I get that not all of these pollsters have been the best in Nevada, but I do trust Emerson. I think that they've been pretty accurate in Nevada in the past, and they've shown even race. And I do think that Sisolak just, he's a very good incumbent. He can definitely win. He has that moderate appeal to the suburbs, and I think he'll do all right with Hispanics. I think he'll do worse than Cortez Masto, but overall, I just don't see. I think that I'm just kind of, I can't really ignore the fact that Nevada looks like it's going to go red this year. I can't really, point out the polling data. Well, no, I can still point out, the polling data misses. I can still, make an argument here, there. But at the end of the day, we've never, like Sisolak and Cortez Masto can come back from this, but I just honestly don't see it right now. And I think that they're going to underperform. I don't think Roe's going to be as big of an issue as people think in Nevada. I was, someone who kind of said, Roe v. Wade's going to help Cortez Masto win and Sisolak win, but I don't see it right now. I think Nevada. This state is a state where Republicans, I know it's been kind of this fool's gold, as some people call it, for the GOP, but I think that this year that's going to break that trend. In Las Vegas, Vegas, Clark County was a county that barely shifted to Biden. It shifted. It didn't shift to Biden. It actually shifted to Trump in 2020, mainly due to Hispanic voters. But Biden still won the state, obviously, because he did well with white suburban voters in Nevada, who were turned off by Trump. So I think that there's a chance for Sisolak and Cortez Masto. It's pretty much a dead heat in both of these races, but I would give Republicans the narrow edge in Nevada. I think Joe Lombardo will narrowly win the race as of right now. So in the final map, after all that, we have Republicans at 30 governorships, Democrats at 20. Democrats flip Maryland and Massachusetts, but they lose. The Republicans flip Oregon, Nevada, Kansas, and Wisconsin. And so, yeah, this is the final map. I know this is a big change from last time. It was 27 Republicans to 23 Democrats last time. But yeah, Republicans are doing pretty well in the governor's races. They're losing in some of them, but these five toss-up races, they're doing pretty well. I still think that they're going to lose the Senate. They might even lose the House, but I mean, that I still think the Republicans are favored in the House, but the Senate doesn't look too great for them right now. But governorships are a lot different than Senate races, and yeah, Democrats are struggling right now. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. We're really close to the election season. Going to be really interesting to watch on election night how these races unfold. I'm sure I'll be wrong about some of these races. Nevada and Oregon, I think, that are the races, that I'm just the most uncertain about. I could also be wrong in Kansas, Arizona, Wisconsin, or even some of these other states, but I don't think I really will be. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel, share it, share the video, turn on notifications, so you don't miss another one. Check out my non-political channel, Interactor127, and my second channel, Political Junk, and my comrades channel, Growling Zoo 666. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time when I talk about all things politics. See ya!